Hello, everyone, and welcome to More About Jesus. I am Danny Simmons.
And I'm Robert Moore. We're here to teach, we're here to learn because all of us need to know more about Jesus.
And we are learning more about Jesus in the Gospel of Mark. We've made our way following Jesus to Mark chapter 10. As Mark 10 begins, the Pharisees will ask Jesus about divorce. The question is this: is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? We need to understand as we look at these passages together today that these men are not looking for the truth. They are testing him. But Jesus' answer goes deeper than the law that they're asking about. He points back to God's design, not to the human loopholes that they have created for themselves. For everyone who hears us today, I want to make this as clear as I can. When you boil everything down, this is the problem with divorce. God hates it, and it is not because he is a strict, narrow-minded dictator. He hates divorce because it opposes his design from the beginning. Divorce is man's way of breaking the covenant relationship that he once committed himself to. When you're married to your spouse and you say, "I do," you are committed to the love of your life before God and family, and that marriage union is sanctified by God himself when it is done according to his design. And that is really going to be the heart of our study today. We're so thankful that you've joined us and you are willing to engage in this study as we begin Mark chapter 10 and verse 1. Then he arose from there and came to the region of Judea by the other side of Jordan. And multitudes gathered to him again, and as he was accustomed, he taught them again. The Pharisees came and asked him, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" Testing him. Well, Robert, here they come again. Jesus has made his way to the region of Judea by the other side of the Jordan River, and he is teaching the multitude that has come to him, and this is God giving his word to the people. The word of God is being taught by the word of God, and here come the Pharisees to ruin another Bible study. The question is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? The first time that you and I came across this, Robert, in our study was when we covered Matthew 5, verses 31 through 32. That was in our fourth episode that we had already reached this picture of marriage, divorce, and remarriage. This is where Jesus first establishes God's will for marriage. It is both sacred and binding. That's what he told us in Matthew 5. Marriage is sacred and binding. What are we looking at here with these men on this special day?
I'm just reminded as you read verse 1 how early on in the Gospel of Mark, you pointed out for us how quickly Jesus became as famous as he was. And the result of that is pretty much anywhere he goes, unless he sort of hides himself, which we've seen him try to do that and be somewhat successful if he wanted to.
Yeah.
The result of that is whenever he comes into a region or back into an area, multitudes come together. And then you read the American Standard is, and as he was wont. Your version, as his custom was. He taught them, and then the word again is added.
Right.
Matthew adds that in addition to teaching them again, Jesus healed them. Just a phrase before we pass on, as was his custom. In other words, that was his habit, that when a multitude came together, the mindset of Jesus was, I'm going to teach them about me and the gospel. I thought about that from the standpoint of what better compliment could be made about you or I or any other New Testament Christian, that it would be said, his or her conversation almost always ends up being spiritual about Jesus. That's how much he cared for these people, and he made it a purpose, a point in his life to try to teach them. You noted that when the Pharisees come and ask him, they're not asking with proper hearts. They're testing or they're trying him. As I understand it, Danny, at this time, there was two famous divinity, trains of thought, philosophical schools among the Jews. That of someone named Shammai, Shammai, and that of someone named Hillel, Hillel. I may not be pronouncing those correctly. On the question of divorce, the school of Shammai maintained that a man could not legally put away his wife except for adultery. But the school of Hillel taught that a man could put away his wife for any number of reasons. Now, if that was the case, and that truly existed, I find it interesting that Jesus did not refer, when asked the question, he did not refer to the opinions of either party. He pointed the Pharisees to the scriptures, to the authority of Moses, to God's original design for marriage between a man and a woman. And there also is a great lesson for you and I, because from time to time, you and I are going to be asked religious questions, or we're going to have religious conversations with people. And it is my habit as I begin those conversations to let them know there will be times you're going to ask me questions. If you do, I'm just going to turn in the Bible and I'm going to show you what the Bible teaches about that. Don't think you're going to get an opinion of mine if it's a scriptural question.
Excellent. That is very, very good. Yeah, so Hillel's, if I had heard you correctly, Hillel's the one who says that the sexual immorality is the only reason that they can be
No,
divorced.
Shimei.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Shimei is the one who says, so Shimei's right, but in the argument that men were having in these days, as I've studied this myself, is that they say, well, but that's a no-brainer, because if she's committed adultery, she's supposed to be stoned.
Mm.
You're divorced, or not divorced, she's dead, and so they wanted to pull that out further and extrapolate. What else could this mean where she doesn't need to be stoned, but divorce can still take place? And then that swung the door wide open.
Yeah.
What the point they missed was God hates divorce, and you should have never done that. And Jesus is going to point out the reason why we're even talking about this back in Moses' day and in this day. For those who are listening to us and want to study this subject in depth and see everything that the Lord has told us about marriage, divorce, and remarriage, I know, Robert, that we'll probably mention these as we go, but let me give you the verses where you can see the teaching of Jesus concerning marriage and divorce. Matthew 19, verses 1 through 10, Matthew 5, 31 through 32, I mentioned that earlier, Mark 10, verses 1 through 12, that's where we are today, and Luke 16 and verse 18, which is just one verse concerning marriage and divorce. It should be said that Paul addresses this subject as well in his letter to the Romans and in his letter to the Corinthians. That's Romans 7, verses 1 through 3. And 1 Corinthians 7, I'm going to drill down to the immediate point there, verses 10 through 11. Paul has a lot to say about that in 1 Corinthians 7, but verses 10 through 11 really is the heart of that subject. And so they've come and they've ruined this Bible study, and they want to have a question answered. And just as you pointed out so well, they want to figure out what side Jesus is on so they can pit him with a group or against another group or whatever it is they're trying to do. They are testing him, and it's infuriating because you would think that the most righteous of us all would come and sit at the feet of the greatest teacher of all and willingly listen. And there's a warning there for all of us who feel like we know Scripture very well. We're not content with a teacher or preacher who's currently laboring with the congregation we're a part of. Don't make that mistake. We are students, as Robert pointed out, of God's Word. If God's Word is shared, then we are right where we should be. And this idea of I know more than you, or you forgot this verse, is nothing but pride. If we can help someone grow and develop as Aquila and Priscilla did for Apollos in Acts 18, fantastic. But oftentimes that's not the goal. It's just I want people to know how much I know, or I'm going to shove in my favorite point, even though it doesn't really fit with what we're talking about. We just need to be on guard. Sit at the feet of Jesus and listen to what he has to say to you. That's a great place to be. Mark 10 and verse 3, Jesus answered and said to them, "What did Moses command you?" They said, "Moses permitted a man to write a certificate of divorce and to dismiss her." And so here's their answer. This precept from Moses is recorded in Deuteronomy 24, verses 1 through 4, where this permission is granted. Do you have anything on that?
Only, as Mark points out, the Lord's answer is, what did Moses command you? That should have got their attention because they would hold to Moses, right? He's very high on their list. I think it's Matthew 19 and 4. We had that phrase, have you not read? So what the Lord is getting ready to teach on wasn't things that should have been hidden from them. They had access to these. They could have, and we see this come up time and time again where the Lord is simply pointing out, listen, if you were actually reading with the right kind of heart, you would already know the answer I'm getting ready to give you. You know, they said, quoting from Deuteronomy 24:1, Moses suffered to write a bill of divorcement and to put her away. And we'll say more about that in a moment, because in the American standard, the word is uncleanness. And if we have a understanding of it, harmonizing it with whatever else the Bible teaches, and you've given us these good verses today, then I'm going to have a better understanding of what that word uncleanness actually meant in Deuteronomy 24:1. But we'll talk about that later on.
Yes, sir. Very good. So in verse 5, after they give him the answer, Moses permitted man to write a certificate of divorce, and he can dismiss his wife. Verse 5, Jesus answered and said to them, because of the hardness of your heart, he wrote you this precept. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So then, they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. As you said, Jesus is working through this with them. First of all, what did Moses command? And they go, oh, actually, Moses gave us permission. Then Jesus uses that very statement to say, because of the hardness of whose heart? Your heart. That is interesting to me because it's the heart of man. It's the ongoing, continual condition of man's heart that is ruining who he's supposed to be as he has been made in the image of God and the life he's supposed to be demonstrating to reveal God to other people. A man whose heart is broken and not fixed on God, does not walk humbly before his God, will always do things to serve himself. And this is where they are. This permission was given because your heart was hard. And so that tells me about Moses is when he wrote it, he's like, okay, here's what we can do. You know, you guys are killing me with this. Everyone wants to divorce his wife, and everyone's got their special reasons. Moses was plagued by it. These people in Jesus' day are plagued by it. It's a very real question. As you pointed out, these camps, they exist. On one thinks this, the other thinks that. And it's a huge issue today. So doesn't it not point to two things, the consistency of God and the heart of man? Getting to a place where divorce is the only option or the best option should tell all of us that we have a serious heart problem. We are New Testament Christians being conformed into the image of God's Son, Romans 8 and verse 29. God has given us a new heart, the heart of Jesus, the heart of Christ. My devotion to my wife should be based on Christ and his love for the church. That's Ephesians 5, 25 through 27. We're to love our wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her and washes her by the water of the word. That's the kind of man I'm supposed to be. And anytime I divert from that, or there's a deviation of that true, pure, holy life, my heart's gotten in the way. And if I can fix it quickly, Robert, I can save so much grief and trouble for my family and for all the people around me.
This morning, I listened to our last week's episode. And I'm telling you, Danny, people are really fortunate to have you a part of this. When I listen to your teachings, first of all, they're always truthful. But what's connected with that, which gives them the potential to penetrate hearts, is the love by which you teach. That was just demonstrated by what you just said there. Thank you for being that way. I thought about Moses, and when he says regarding the hardness of their heart, wasn't that something that he was well acquainted with? Think about Pharaoh and his hard heart and what it cost Egypt. Think about the hardness of the heart of the children of Israel being delivered out of captivity, all that was done for them, and yet you see this continual hardening of the heart. Thus, as you stated, something that we need to be careful about ourselves, where all of a sudden truth is not able to penetrate. It's just outstanding that we're talking about the heart, and yet if I remember in the first discourse as Jesus began to teach those Beatitudes, we were saying and have said a number of times, Look how he's getting to the heart of the matter, because it's these external things that won't get you anywhere. I'll deviate just for a moment if I haven't done that already. Verse 6, but from the beginning of the creation, male and female made he them. There are a few places in my Bible, based upon things I've been taught in the past and others who I've come in contact with, that I have simply this phrase written, and you can see it: 24-hour day argument. Now, the reason I have that there is because there is a theory called the gap theory. I wasn't aware of it. It's also called the ruin, reconstruction, creation. And that asserts that a vast, unspecified period of time, potentially billions of years, exists between Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. It attempts to reconcile the biblical creation account with secular scientific timelines, such as the fossil record and the geological age of the earth. I'll simply say this, maybe it just perks your curiosity because there's other places. I want you to note the timestamp that an inspired Moses gives us. The creation of Adam and Eve is connected to the beginning of creation.
Yes, sir. Man, that is really good.
I realize off subject. Back to what the Lord was teaching. So disappointed in these men who come to him, who, for the most part, the world of that day looks as the religious leaders, and yet their hearts are far from him. They're not asking questions for the right reasons. They don't want the answers because they've already determined what they're going to do. And thus the truth won't have any impact on their lives, as it won't in the lives of people today. If I approach the Lord already with my mind determined, this is what I'm going to do, I tell you what, the truth of the gospel and what Jesus teaches is just not going to help. And boy, that could probably never be stronger or seen more than in what we're talking about today, the marriage relationship.
Exactly.
Or the subject of divorce. He mentions, and now he goes back to the Old Testament, right, in his answer from the beginning, and he now quotes, "For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife, and the two become one flesh." They're no longer two, but one. And then that grand statement, "What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder." I find it outstanding that Jesus, in answering their question, puts the emphasis on marriage rather than divorce.
Exactly.
In the beginning, in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 27, Moses records the following: "And God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them." In quoting Genesis 1 and 27, Jesus indicated, number one, that God made men and women different. And number two, that God joins men and women together in marriage. In this, Jesus asserts God's authority over marriage. Danny, marriage is God's institution, not man's. In the second chapter of Genesis, Moses is inspired to write these: "And Jehovah God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man," that's Adam, "and he slept. And he took one of Adam's ribs and closed up the flesh instead thereof. And the rib which Jehovah God had taken from the man made he a woman and brought her unto the man. The two shall become one." That's what we read. United as one in law, one in feeling, one in love, one in interest, one in affection. And then in verse 9, Jesus also reminded the Pharisees that marriage is spiritually binding before God. And we need to keep that in mind.
Yes, sir. And you reading that has been really helpful to me in this moment because there's this conversation that comes up a lot about sexual immorality and is God really displeased if I move in with my girlfriend kind of thing. It does come up a lot and just for a lot of different reasons and really all through my life. I mean, those are questions I've asked myself or someone that I thought knew the Bible well enough. What's the big deal? We'll be married eventually or those kind of things. But what you just read in its simplicity makes that so clear that God is the one who sanctifies the union between a husband and a wife. And we know that once they are married, that they consummate that
Mhm.
marriage. And that moment of love and affection and passion and all those beautiful things are to be found only in marriage between a husband and a wife. And the world wants to offer it in every other way. And don't we know by now how damaging that is to everyone? If you try to reverse those things, what you're saying, no matter what you're saying verbally to the one you say you love, what you're saying to them is, you're not important enough to me to commit myself. Let me just have what I want now, and you can get what you want. Yes, let's just make a deal where we just give each other what we want, and I can leave you high and dry. I can leave you behind. I can always opt to walk away because we're not married. We have not offered our lives to each other. All of that is a deviation of God's will, and it is from no one else but Satan. No matter how much you try to paint that over or make that look like something it isn't, when you read Genesis chapter 1, I just thought, well, there it is right there. It is so clear. They're joined together. The marriage union is sanctified by God. And then the husband and wife go into the chamber to consummate. That was always the practice of the Jews. Everyone understands that. And this role reversal and the way these things should happen is disgusting. And if you have a young man and a young woman who can save themselves for each other and to know that, both of them know that for sure, what a precious gift.
I read in verse 9 those two words joined together. That Greek word is spelled Sunezeuxen.
Mm.
I know. And the word is yoked together as oxen in the plow, where each one must pull equally in order to bring it on.
Nice.
Among the ancients, when persons were newly married, they say they put a yoke upon their necks or they put chains upon their arms to demonstrate that they were to be one, closely united, pulling equally together in all the concerns of life. Danny, you pointed out very ably regarding how in the Old Testament it's very clear to see when two became one. I thought of Jacob, and although he believes he's getting ready to marry the love of his life, Rachel, his father-in-law will end up deceiving him with Leah. But the Bible is very clear when they were married. In Genesis 29 and verse 31 is when he went in unto her, as you said. And now the marriage was consummated. Two became one. And of course, Adam and Eve would have been the first two, would have understood that completely.
Yes. There were no options then, were there?
There were not.
By the way, greatest dating service of all time. Just knock the man out, create the woman he needs, bring her to him, and then wake him up. Adam had a pretty sweet deal there. No online search.
Imagination. I can't imagine what it was like for the two when they saw each other, as it began with the abilities that God gave them to reason and to think and understand, to observe each other's bodies and to see how perfectly they had been made and fit together.
Amen. It is a beautiful thing. Yeah, the first time, the first glimpse, to look and for him to lose his breath and be like, whoa. Because remember, just before that moment, before he sees Eve, he has named all of the animals. And the Bible's clear to say to us, male and female.
That's right.
There was no helpmeet found for Adam.
That's right.
And so, wow, what a feeling. I've felt that in high school once, by the way. And I'm so thankful that I saw her and that it's come to be what it is. One other thing about the passages that we've read, you've talked about God establishing this from the beginning. that when they are joined together, they are one flesh. They are no longer two, but one flesh. Verse 9, and I just want to read this with an understanding that, for me as a young man, my parents were divorced when I was 7. And so Christian home, but things turned south. And I remember several times with my father on different occasions that he would read Mark 10 and verse 9 to me and to my other siblings. Therefore, what God has joined together, let not man separate. And for us as kids, he would say, let no man ever separate. We talk about going in and getting a certificate of divorce, and, well, the law says this and state law says that. Let not man, whether that's the husband and the wife or the law system or whatever's on the books, let not man. It covers everything. God has joined them together. The point here is do not let this happen. Let not man come in and separate what God has joined together. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but it's kind of became more of a famous way of teaching on marriage, divorce, and remarriage for gospel preachers. If you can do it, the preacher would take 2 2x4s. You've seen this, and he'd take a vise, push them together, and glue them together, seal them together. And then when he would bring these 2 2x4s that are already molded together and dried out, explains to the congregation that actually the center, and it helps explain what God's done, the center, the binding that's been used to keep these boards together is stronger than the boards themselves. So takes some other tool and begins to put pressure on the outside of those 2x4 boards, and they snap. And no matter how they snap or when they snap, he can hold them both up and show that neither board will ever be the same. Something is ripped away one from another. The binding held them together and made them stronger. And so there's that let not man separate. Well, the preacher says, well, I'm going to do it anyway. And then when he does, there's the visible evidence that one board is just destroyed. And the other one's, it's no good either. It's got more board and it's got all the glue on it. It's ugly. And it just helps explain so beautifully what happens in, as you and I were talking earlier today, as you said, a long drawn out process. You don't get there overnight. There's a lot of things said and done that lead to, well, I guess this is what we're going to have to do. And what you're doing is you're taking that simple illustration. You're taking the 2x4s and saying, let's just bust them apart.
Yeah.
And I'll take what I can.
Well, with that in mind, so that's a great illustration, one I haven't heard before, but I'm visually seeing the 2 boards now and the destruction, how that both will never be the same again. I'm interested in some of the statistics and some of the remarks that you have as it relates to this, things that you've been able to find out for us. Can you share that with us?
Yes, sir. I'll read some of this and then we'll finish with verses 10 through 12.
Yeah.
Here's some things that I found. And again, these are just things that are measurable. The consequences of divorce, and again, not theoretical, they're measurable and they are obviously painful and far reaching. I think we should say too, before I read this, that I already offered my own story to some degree, that everyone who ever hears this, and I hate to say it, but everyone who ever hears this is affected or impacted in some way by divorce. And so it should be a topic of conversation, especially in a spiritual realm, more frequently than I think that it is. It's so important. It's important to God. It should be important to us. There are serious health challenges that you will face when entering into the time of divorce. Divorced individuals experience significantly higher rates of depression and anxiety, roughly twice than that of married individuals. Divorce ranks among the most stressful life events, second only to the death of a spouse. The woman's risk of heart attack increases 24% after one divorce and 77% after 2 or more divorces. For their children, if there's children involved, there's increased emotional distress, behavioral issues, and academic struggles. Children often feel guilt, confusion, and abandonment. Man, I know that's true. Recent U.S. Census research shows divorce has lifelong consequences for many children. Teen birth rate increases 63% after parental divorce. Incarceration risk triples compared to children of married parents. Mortality risk increases 40% before age 25 60% of children live primarily with their mother, and only 18% live with their father. The distance, Robert, between children and the non-resident parent increases by 100 miles on average and over 200 miles after 10 years. The parents don't only separate, they live so far apart the child can't possibly be with or enjoy the company of mother and father. You see that God's design established and set up the way that it is. I'm not saying being married and being next to your spouse is the easiest thing that you'll ever do. That's not the point. The point is when you say, well, we have to separate, we've got to break this up. We have to break what God has sealed together. The immeasurable damage that takes place, not only with those around you or in those around you, but in you yourself, that understand that the lie of it'll be better once this divorce is over is a lie. We always carry that weight with us. There's always baggage, and there are always consequences that we cannot in any way control. I always urge people when this conversation comes up and there's a debate and there's a problem, I always say to them that if you'll go with me 20 years into the future and look back, can you say today, did I do everything I possibly could have done to save my marriage? You better know the answer to that, because 20 years from now is coming. And you're going to give an answer not only to yourself, but maybe to your kids who are now 25, 26, 27 years old. Dad, why'd you leave Mom? Mom, why'd you do that to Dad? You better remember what your answer is, because you will give an answer. And more importantly than all of that, we give an answer to God for the way that we do this. And so I tell couples that if you can work through this and do it God's way, what you will find is your marriage is stronger now than ever before, because you've proven that you can make it through the hard times together as you swore on the day of your marriage. I think that's such a greater story.
That's excellent. And thank you so much for sharing those difficult statistics. But as you read them, I was reminded of the adversary. And since the beginning, it is his desire to destroy mankind. He knows that marriage is the institution of God and that it is a perfect way for a man and a woman to live together. Since the beginning, he's been in the art and he's perfected it of destroying that marriage. And that's what he still tries to do today. And thus, we need to do everything we can, as you just noted, no matter where we're at in our marriages, how long we've been married. We need to do everything within our power to continue to make our marriage as God would have it.
Yes, sir. Let me read Mark 10 through 12, and we'll finish this study together. We appreciate everyone's careful attention. Verse 10, in the house, his disciples also asked him again about the same matter. So he said to them, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if a woman divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. We have a few things we want to say about that. One thing I don't want to forget is that Mark 10, 11, 12. Mark chapter 10, verses 11 and 12. It's easy to remember. Mark 10, 11, 12. Mark is the only one who gives us a scenario where the woman divorces her husband. That question comes up a lot with me where people say, I've read every passage and it says that only the man can divorce his wife. Mark 10, 11, and 12 is a place where you can see that the woman can make this dreadful mistake as well.
Well, we finished our study. In the back of my mind, I'm still thinking about what Malachi wrote in chapter 2 and verse 16, that Jehovah hates divorce or the putting away. In verse 10, after Jesus had taught on this already in the presence of the Pharisees and the multitudes, they come into a house, and it's still on his disciples' minds. So they say unto him, in Matthew's account, if the case of the man is so with his wife, it's not expedient to marry. That's what they're dealing with within their own mindset. And the Lord simply responds with truth. This is where it is. Someone wants to know, well, can I do this? And then can I do that? What did the Lord say? Whosoever puts away his wife, whoever divorces his wife, marries another, now lives maybe in the eyes of the law with someone else, having sexual relations with this new person, that person and the one he is living with are now committing the sin of adultery. Because as we noted earlier, Danny, before we started talking, we have to back up when we look at these passages, when we look at what's going on in the lives of people, and we have to go, who in the eyes of God is this person still married to? Who does he see them with? And of course, here he basically says, whosoever shall put away his wife and marry another committeth adultery against her. He commits adultery against the another woman. With this answer, Jesus interpreted the meaning of the word uncleanness in Deuteronomy 24:1. Now that came up earlier because the question was, what did Moses command you? Have you not read? And their answer, the Pharisees' answer, quoting from Deuteronomy 24 and verse 1 was, well, now that you've asked us, Moses suffered to write a bill of divorcement and to put her away. But the key word in 24:1 is that word uncleanness.
Yep.
So again, if we take what Jesus says in verse 11 to repeat it again, Jesus interpreted the meaning of the word uncleanness. Your version may say unseemly or indecency in 24:1, showing that divorce and the freedom to remarry was only permitted in the case of sexual immorality. The reason why a person who does not have a scriptural reason for divorce commits adultery upon remarrying, as does their new spouse, is because, Danny, they are not divorced in the eyes of God. We might speak to people regarding their marriage and why it's dissolving and why they're divorcing, and you have all these various reasons that are thrown out. Incompatibility, not loving each other anymore. Sadly, sometimes brutality. Some just say it's misery. Danny, none of those are grounds for divorce, though they may possibly be grounds for separation, till a biblical solution is sought, taught, and obeyed.